Well, welcome back to the podcast. I want to give you a dose of reality from a biblical perspective today as we dive into a couple of current events. We're picking up more and more viewers, which I really appreciate, all across the different platforms that we're on. But do me a favor and make sure that you share the podcast with a friend that you think would appreciate this type of content. And if you have a topic that you'd like to see me break down, I would so much appreciate it if you would just let me know. Today, I'm going to hit on a couple of things that everyone is paying attention to right now. You don't have a choice. You have to pay attention to these things right now. And those two things are, first of all, the New York conviction of Donald Trump. And then we are getting into Pride Month as well, which is upon us. So let's jump into the conviction of Donald Trump first. How should Christians think about and respond to this trial and this conviction? First of all, what seems to be clear is... I think what seems to be clear is that Donald Trump had an affair with Stormy Daniels and paid her hush money. Now, he still denies that. I'm not real sure why you have her sign an NDA and all those kind of things if it didn't really happen. As Christians, though, there's nothing there as far as what I just said that we can be okay with, right? Clearly, this shows something about his character at that point in time. The affair happened in 2006, and I think it's important to say that up front, right? I think it's important for us as Christians to make it clear we're not okay with this type of behavior. This is seedy behavior. It's wrong behavior. It's not something that we can endorse. And I see Christians saying things like, he did nothing wrong. Well, legally, that may be true, but morally, it's not true. What he did was a sin, assuming that it's true. Again, I don't know why you pay out or have somebody sign an NDA if it's not. So how should we look at this when we're evaluating a candidate, right? We typically try to look for the most Christian candidate. And again, as believers in America, we've often had an option that appears to be the most Christian candidate in the past. And what American Christians really don't seem to understand is that increasingly our culture is a post-Christian culture. And so, it's not always going to be true anymore. And it's not true, I don't think anymore, that we just always have just a great Christian option to vote for. Most nations don't have that option in most of their elections. However, at the same time, the character of a person does matter, right, when it comes to making these choices. And so, first of all, I don't know if Donald Trump is a Christian. I don't know. There's a 2016 CBS News article that quotes James Dobson saying that he knows the person who led Trump to Christ and that it had been recent. In 2016, it had been recent. So, we can't know that for sure. 2016 is an interesting time to get saved when you need the evangelical vote to get elected. However, putting the mean tweets aside, he does seem to have a different lifestyle over the last several years and a different mindset over the last several years than what he had in the past. And he seems to value different things. And for the most part, he seems genuinely concerned about religious rights and moral issues in our culture. And so, am I 100% thrilled with everything he supports? No. But for the most part, he has seemed pretty solid in terms of what believers would like to see get accomplished in government. Again, I can't say that I know what's going on with his heart, though. So for believers, we should be the type of people that are hopeful. When someone claims to become a Christian, we should be hopeful that that is true. We should believe that past sins can be forgiven and that a person can change. But we also shouldn't be naive, right, when it comes to public figures either. And so, the world is doing a lot of telling us what we should think of Trump. And what I'm hearing that the fact that so many Christians are voting for him is causing people to not want to have anything to do with churches. And I think that there's two reasons for this, and that's a very concerning thing, a very concerning trend for Christians. It's a catch-22. Like literally, we can either not vote for this person to prove that whatever it is we're trying to prove to the public about Christianity and churches, and let the most godless regime continue, or we can try to stop that. So it's really hard. But I think one of the reasons that we're in this situation is I think the media has painted him as in such a way that it just seems totally crazy for a Christian to support him, right? They paint him as a racist by constantly repeating things like very fine people on both sides from Charlottesville, I believe it was. And even though he qualified that statement by saying, I'm specifically not talking about white supremacists, that never gets quoted. And they also paint him as a criminal and a foreign agent. never going back and clearing up the way that his opponents made up the Russian collusion scandal. Obviously, they paint him as a misogynist, and when you look at the Stormy Daniels thing, and you look at the audio tape that came out right before the 2016 election, there's definitely a case to be made for that, at least in the past. So, Christians stand in a really tough place. We can either allow the party that pushes the most godless platform in the history of our country to be elected by throwing away our vote on a third-party candidate, which also, by the way, are not godly options, or just staying home. Or we can vote for a person who did a pretty good job of pushing policies that were just and right and seemed to be, but we're going to come across to the public as supporting this caricature that the media has created. And so you've already heard me say, I don't think we can let what others think about our choices allow us to let the far left's policies and platforms succeed. Like we have to do kind of what is the wisest and best choice in this situation. We can paint some wonderful picture of, it'd be so nice if there was but there's not, right? There's not. And so it's either let the most godless side succeed, or it's support an imperfect person. And so that's kind of where we are. But there's another reason why people, I think, are disappointed in evangelicals and turned off by their support of by our support of Trump. And I think, frankly, this is our fault. And I think it needs to change. Some Christians appear to worship Trump and to worship politics. We come across as if getting the right person elected is where we have put all of our hope. And some Christians post about their political beliefs incessantly on social media, but they never say anything about what God is doing in their lives. It just doesn't seem like that their hope is in God. It seems like their hope is in politics, and we're sending the wrong message. Some Christians spend more time helping somebody get elected than they do sharing the gospel. And this just says that our hope is in political wins more than in the transforming power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And so if we want to see our culture change, we're not helpless, right? We've been given the most powerful message in the world that changes people's hearts. And so when we have a spiritual revival in this country, we won't have to worry about how people vote. But on top of that, let's look at some of the awful stuff that Christians are posting after the verdict came out in this trial. Here's some things that are just crazy. Here's a post. It says, "Hey, Jesus was convicted in a sham trial, and I still follow him." Wow. This influencer says Jesus, Paul, Peter, Thomas, John, and all of the disciples were also found guilty. Here's one that shows Donald Trump's mugshot and Jesus on the cross. And it says, if you're not sure you can vote for a convicted criminal, remember you worship one. And finally, there's this one with this ghostly image of Jesus standing behind Donald Trump with his hands on his shoulders. And he just says, it's okay. They called me guilty too. So this is where even the world, I think, is looking at Christians and thinking, you guys have elevated Donald Trump to a weird level, right? These messages even kind of border on blasphemy, right? And so there isn't a politician that we should be comparing to the sacrifice that Jesus made for us. I think we can all agree. And I think this type of stuff is way, 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 way too far. So let's take a short break and then come back and look at the actual case.
From toddler fits to use of technology, it's hard to know where to draw the line between avoiding huge consequences and training a child to think correctly on their own. That's where Discipline That Disciples can help. Pick it up on Amazon today.
All right, well, let's talk about the significance of the case for a moment. There is little doubt that this was a political hit. This DA campaigned on the concept that he was going to lock up Donald Trump. Trump was being tried for a federal offense in a state court. The statute of limitations was already up on this matter in terms of the misdemeanors, and the jury was instructed that they didn't even have to agree what the underlying crime was, yet the underlying crime was what made it a felony. So falsifying business records in the state of New York is a misdemeanor unless it is in the furtherance of a crime. But the prosecution never clearly defined what the larger offense was, and the judge made sure to help that strategy be successful by instructing the jury that they didn't even have to agree on what that larger offense was. And of course, there's major conflicts of interest with this particular judge as well. So lots of problems with this particular case and how justice was carried out in this situation. Not to mention the fact that just this concept of going after political opponents. I mean, I don't know where the line is. At what point we say, look, if you do something so bad, we have to prosecute you. But for the most part, kind of keeping our hands off the situation where we go after prosecuting former presidents and just, I mean, no good people are ever going to want to run for office in this kind of environment. And so here's the issue, I think, for believers, though. We should be very concerned about justice, and we should also be concerned about the destruction of our system. No matter what you think about Donald Trump, you should be concerned about the weaponization of our justice system. There have been, other times when our justice system was not fair to all people or targeted people based on race in the past, and Christians should have been the most vocal about that injustice at that time. And many Christians did work toward fairness in that situation. But we should be just as concerned about this situation. The danger is that some people are willing to break our system in order to win. They're literally willing to just destroy all fairness, all rules, anything that they have to destroy in order to get done what they want to get done. And they justify that by saying, that Trump's going to act like a dictator if he gets reelected. One of the best posts that kind of jokes about that I saw this week was, if we could just jail Trump in the Electoral College, stack the Supreme Court, ban voter ID, and censor free speech, we could save democracy. And that's what you're hearing. You're hearing, Donald Trump is the greatest threat we have to democracy. Therefore, these are all the things that we're going to do. And they're things that are actually not legal or not handled correctly. And so we're literally destroying democracy to save democracy. And so, that quote is, I think, just making the point that one side is willing to pretty much destroy the country in order to keep power. So here's why Christians should care about this. Listen to Proverbs 16:11. It says, "A just balance and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his work." And so God says that justice is when the scales are balanced, right? When they work the same way for everyone. Psalm 106 verse 3 says, "Blessed are they who observe justice, who do righteous at all times." Proverbs 21:15 says, "When justice is done, it is a joy to the righteous, but terror to evildoers." And we're not seeing that right now, right? We're seeing people lose heart because they can tell that the people in power are not concerned about fairness. They're not concerned about following the rules that we all kind of have agreed on if they need to get something done. And they're willing to change the rules in order to get something, to get someone that they disagree with. And right now in New York City, justice is not a terror to the evildoers. It's a terror to the righteous, right? They're not actually dealing with the evildoers. They're dealing with things like this. So biblically, what we're seeing is concerning. We should be speaking out about the use of our justice system to silence a political candidate. But we also should not come across as if he is perfect, or somehow his plight is comparable to Jesus, or somehow that our hope is more in getting that situation fixed than it is in Jesus himself. And so right after the break, we're going to jump in to Pride Month.
Is your church seeing life transformation that has led to disciples making disciples that make disciples? Jim can help your church come alive with life change. Contact him for a consult today.
All right, well, June is upon us, and you know what that means. Every streaming service is offering a full complement of LGBT works. Every company has changed their logo to one with a rainbow in it. Pride parades are in our street, and some of you work in companies that are encouraging you to participate in observances of Pride Month. And so how can we handle this cultural emphasis on sin? How do we go about that? Well, first of all, I think it's ironic that it's called Pride Month and that it uses a rainbow as its symbol. The rainbow was given by God as a symbol that he would never again destroy the world the way he did in the flood in Genesis. And so the reason God destroyed the world with a flood is because of how openly wicked people had become. And so I don't think it's intentional, but it really is kind of mocking God's ability to judge sin. And Peter predicted this in 2 Peter 3, starting verse 3. Listen to what he says. He says, above all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. And they will say, where is this coming he promised? Ever since our ancestors died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. But listen, they deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens came into being and the earth was formed out of water and by water. So just think about this for a second. It's starting with creation, right? Peter's saying they deliberately forget that God is our creator and we're accountable to him. And then verse 6, he says, by these waters also, the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. So he says, in the last days, there's going to be people, and they're going to be going around saying, well, your God isn't coming back to deal with us someday. Everything just keeps rolling along like it always has, right? But Peter points out that they're ignoring that at one point, God got so frustrated with the sinfulness of the world that he flooded it. And yes, he sent a rainbow and said, I'm never going to do that again. So yeah, the flood's not coming back, but he says fire's coming. And so, you can't deliberately forget much more than to literally use the symbol that God once judged the world as your symbol for taking pride in sin. That's about as forgetful as you can be, deliberately. And so Romans 1:32 says this. It says, though they know God's righteous decrees, that those who practice such things deserve to die, which, by the way, this is Romans chapter 1, earlier, around 24, 25, 26, he literally talks about homosexuality. And so he's saying those who do these things, that they deserve death. All of us as sinners deserve death, right? And he says, but not only they do these things, but they give approval to those who practice them. And that's what this whole month is about, is giving approval to these particular behaviors. Now, some of you may wonder, well, why is he even talking about LGBT issues like they're wrong? Like you've been told the Bible doesn't actually teach anything about these practices. You've been told, Jesus would actually be good with them. And I've already dealt with some of the biblical evidence in a previous podcast. But I would encourage you to pick up my book, Christ and Culture, on Amazon. I've got a whole chapter on all the different arguments that people make as to why what the Bible seems to be clearly saying is not true. And I deal with how what they're saying is actually not true, that the Bible is plainly speaking on these issues. So how should we respond as Christians during a month like this, when these sins are being highlighted and celebrated in our culture? Well, I think we need to take the Daniel approach, right? When you look at the beginning of the book of Daniel, he's in a foreign land. They don't care about his God. They don't care about what's right according to his God. He was being asked to eat some things that he felt would dishonor his God, and he respectfully made his position known. And he did not participate in the things that he felt were wrong. And so if you're in a company that pushes some sort of participation, this, I think, ought to be your approach. Letting your boss know, as a Christian, you can't participate, but you do love everyone, and you're not trying to disrespect anyone, but you're not going to be able to join in. And I think maybe that's the best way to go about it right now at this point. Now, when it comes to the broader culture, I don't think there's anything wrong with letting your views be known. A lot of these companies are pushing the LGBT agenda because they want to look good in terms of ESG scores. So letting them know by private message that you're not impressed with the way that they're pushing the LGBT agenda, you don't even have to make it about a religious thing. Hey, this does not appeal to me. I'm not interested in this. I feel like you're shoving something that is immoral, and that you're less likely to buy from them. That can help kind of squelch this outsized power that the LGBT community is having on our culture. So I say do it privately because, you could post under one of their posts that, I'm not interested in this. This makes me less likely to buy, that kind of thing. But generally speaking, when it comes to how the world perceives Christians, public debate on social media really isn't the most effective, and you're not really going to get a fair hearing there anyway. The last thing I will say is, again, we have to love people well and lead them to Jesus. The problem in this world is not a political problem. It's not a political party. It's not a particular group. The problem is that people don't know Jesus. So if you haven't led anyone to Christ, or you haven't been intentional to try to have spiritual conversations with people that could begin to take people down that journey of knowing Christ, and you haven't discipled anyone, I hate to say it, but you are part of the problem. You were sent to be light in a dark world. And in the words of Jesus, you're hiding it. You know, in the old King James, hide it under a bushel. Like that's you're hiding it under a bowl, as other translations say. And so that's one of the things that I work with people on. I work with a great group of people that trains people, and we're really good at training people in churches to make disciples and to know how to engage people who don't think like you at all with the gospel. And so if you need help with that, I encourage you to reach out. But I think your concern over culture should drive you to pouring into other people spiritually. And anything, you have to understand, anything that we accomplish politically can just be undone just like that. And I think you saw that, right? I think you saw that anything that an executive order could sign when we switched administrations last time, like things just got completely undone. And think good things that were put in place were taken out. And so what we need is heart change. We need lives and hearts to be changed in our culture. So be respectful. Don't hurt your testimonies with unbelievers during this month, but don't support the hype either. Well, that's all the time we have for today. We will see you next Friday on the Spiritual Reality Podcast.